Okay, this is our last lecture, Chapter 11, on the last realm in our textbook, Oceania. You'll notice that I actually kind of combined two other realms into this one. The Austral realm, which some geographers use, and then another realm that we call the Pacific realm, which would be the Pacific Ocean and the islands out there. So this book kind of puts those two realms together and calls it the Oceania realm. Obviously, it's the one realm that has the smallest land area. The obvious largest land area would be Australia, and it's very sparsely populated. It consists primarily of Australia, New Zealand, and in the Pacific area, three regions of islands: Melanesia, not melanoma, Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia. And then, of course, it also includes the continent of Antarctica. In terms of climate, most of Australia, which is the largest land base, is relatively dry. New Zealand is a little bit wetter. It's in the islands and it's south and east of Australia. And of course, Antarctica is very, very cold and very, very dry. Obviously, climate change is an issue in this area. Many are claiming the melting glaciers and the sea level rise. I think if you look at the total information out there, you'll notice that the sea level may be rising and falling over time. That's normal, and that you will have elements of increased glacier size in Antarctica, whereas in the Arctic Circle, they're claiming that the Arctic is shrinking with Arctic ice. So you're finding a movement on either way and either side of that. Antarctica is very unique as a continental area in this realm because it's claimed by a lot of different countries, as you can tell by the map that I put on the slide. It's used primarily for scientific research and tourism, and they're studying climate on this. And you'll notice, look at all the countries that claim it. As I said, the two largest landforms in this realm are Australia and New Zealand. New Zealand is very rugged, very mountainous. These are old volcanoes, and so it could be very treacherous, very productive agriculture. And if you like the Lord of the Rings films, they were filmed in New Zealand. Out in the Pacific, you find two types of islands. You find the high islands, which are volcanic with heavy rainfall, and those are the ones that are populated with people. And then you have the low Pacific Islands, which are virtually coral reefs, very vulnerable to rising seas and weather and so on and so forth. In Australia in particular, they're very highly industrial, and mining is a big deal there. Obviously, pollution is a concern. Whenever you do any heavy metal mining, pollution is a problem. This is also an area where nuclear testing took place in the United States out in the Pacific Islands, looking for uranium. Obviously, that's an environmental pollution issue, but it's also an area of interest for energy because nuclear energy happens to be the cleanest of all the energy sources out there. Our concern for the environment is as much involved with this realm as the other realms, as you can tell in your reading. In terms of agriculture, you'll notice most of Australia is rather too dry for agriculture, but you'll find in the southwest regions and in the southeastern regions where you have better moisture, flatlands, you can now have great livestock, wheat and cotton production. New Zealand has limited agriculture because it's mostly mountainous, and the same thing is true in the Pacific Islands, where they draw most of their income from tourism, except there are some fruits and vegetables that can be grown in the Pacific Islands that you're aware of, especially in Hawaii. What makes this realm interesting politically is that because of all the islands and all the political claims to the lands out there, they've had to set up what they call exclusive economic zones, which are EEZs. Now that will be explained in your chapter, and basically it gives guidance for foreign countries as to where you draw your boundaries for the lands or the islands that you're claiming. So read up on that. You'll notice in Australia one of the most important areas for concern is the Great Barrier Reef on the northeastern side of Australia. And then they're obviously concerned about climate and how that's affecting the reef. This area of the world was colonized by a lot of different people. In particular, James Cook from England colonized Australia and New Zealand. And at one time, this was a penal colony, introduced livestock to the area, and so it's been under their influence for many years. You will find that this realm is now being influenced more from China than they are from Great Britain. You can also see some influence of the Spanish, obviously fishing and whaling, and of course there was some colonial resistance by the natives that were living on the islands in Australia and New Zealand. One of the things that's interesting, I think, about this part of the world in terms of economics is it's rather isolated, but it is integrating with Southeast Asia and East Asia a lot more than they are integrating with the European countries and the United States. And that's primarily because they're closer to the Asians than they are to the Americans and the Brits. Obviously, tourism is a big deal in this part of the world, as you can tell from this lovely picture. They are having the same type of issues with poverty and inequality. Obviously, the more free and independent governments are, the more likelihood they're going to have less poverty and less inequality. Australia and New Zealand are fairly free, and so they have very high standards of living. The Pacific Islands are rather poor simply because they don't have much to offer, and if you're living on the islands, you're probably doing a high degree of subsistence farming or benefiting from tourism. In terms of culture, religion, and language, English is predominant in this realm in terms of language. Christianity is predominant, and you also have a high degree of native cultures that are there. In terms of population, very low population, obviously, very slow growth. In the islands, though, you have a higher fertility rate, and that could cause some problems if the islands are unable to handle the larger populations. I guess some of the future geographic challenges for this realm has to do with, can the islands sustain large populations? And obviously, the connections to economic ventures in Asia will be important. And then, of course, mixing traditional cultures with the influence of Europeans and Asians. That will always be an issue. Thank you.